In 2007, we saw the beginning of the terminal crisis of what I call the dollar system. The only near precedent for this crisis was the collapse of the British pound and the British Empire in the years leading to World War I. The causes of that collapse are many, but the primary cause over the last 25 years was the systematic deregulation of the financial system. By politicians in Washington who relied on Wall Street banks to get campaign contributions and did what Wall Street banks told them to vote for. Today in America, a legal form of corruption of the political process. The consequence of the crisis that broke out in 2007 and became global in 2008 was the unprecedented looting of the American taxpayer to prop up 6 or 8 banks that were deemed too big to fail, the Wall Street banks. The result of the process, instead of putting bank executives in prison after suitable trial, which would be more appropriate, they are existing as before, and the economy has been impoverished by the diversion of credit to these banks that are not lending to the real economy, but speculating in the global economy. The consequence has been a federal debt of the U.S. government that has spiraled literally out of control over the past 5 years. From the time 1944 of the Bretton-Wood conference until 1971 August, when President Nixon abandoned the gold backing of the US dollar, the US currency, the dollar, was backed by a certain ratio of gold. Today, the only thing backing the US dollar, which is being printed and disseminated worldwide in abundance, unprecedented, are F-16 fighter jets and Abrams tanks. In other words, the military might of the United States is the backing of the dollar today. To understand what has gone on, we must understand that there are perhaps less than 200 global corporations, 147 by one estimate, that dominate the most critical parts of the entire world economy today. And at the top of that pyramid of power are the banks and the financial institutions, the funds of Boston and Wall Street. The rules of the World Trade Organization, the pressure by Washington on governments around the world to privatize, to adopt the Milton Friedman free market model, the Jeffrey Sachs shock therapy, and so forth, has enabled this concentration of power into private corporate hands.
და თავარი მცდელობა არის ის, რომ არ იყოს ეს ყველაფერი არ იყოს კერძო პირების თანამშრომლობის ხელში, არამედ უფრო საზოგადოებრივად ცნობილი, ჩართული იყოს არა მხოლოდ რამოდენიმე კონკრეტული პირი, არამედ მთელ მსოფლიოში იყოს, მთელი მსოფლიოს ხელში იყოს ეს ყველაფერი.
For the powers that dominate this corporativist dollar system machine, the only way out of the crisis, the only logic to continue honoring their debts as they want them repaid is war. Today the world is literally on the brink of a new war that threatens quite easily to become a global conflagration, not only in the Middle East, against China, against Russia, against other countries, but and this is the logic of neoliberalism, where finance dominates all human values. The Lord's Prayer, among other things, says, "Forgive us our debts." Well, I think we ought to have a moratorium on the debts of this dollar system and begin rebuilding our economies in a real sense with human values instead of financial values. And my own view is that Eurasia, the nations of Eurasia as nations, not as a Soviet system, but as nations, if they manage to form bonds of economic cooperation, even military cooperation because of the power of NATO, that this provides an alternative for peace and development in the world to the collapse of this dollar system. Thank you.